The earlier we start the exhaust event, the more piston the valve clearance will get on the exhaust side. And the later we start the intake event, the more piston the valve clearance will have on the intake side. You know, so you want to open the valves to let that exhaust out, just to start blowing it down.
And let's talk about that on blowdown and the importance of it for the event that follows the exhaust stroke. And
So
what
let's keep going. Probably gonna blow down a little bit after 90 degrees. Okay, this is a non-VTEC, so this is not blowing down very much. So this thing blows down 55 degrees before bottom dead center. And like on the drag race, all naturally aspirated stuff, the blowdown's probably happening closer to 90, 80, like 80 before bottom dead center, 90 before bottom dead center. And I'm talking actual opening. I'm not talking 50 numbers. You know? So like for example, like on a K drag race engine, the exhaust might open at 70 degrees before bottom dead center.
What's the cranking compression like on that engine?
Cranking compression? I don't know. I haven't measured.
it's probably 270 psi. It's not much. 270, 250.
Your average turbo engine, you know, you're going to be that 150, 160 range. So 270 is, you know,
Double.
pretty cool to tie the sound coming out of the pipe to the cylinder pressure that's being produced, you know?
You'll hear mine one day, especially with the recent revision.
Here, you know, we blow it down before it ever hits the bottom dead center.
And we should probably talk on some of the negative effects of starting that blowdown too early.
Well, if it's too early, you might lose power. And then if it's a super boosted type of application, you might be opening it into more pressure than the valve train wants you to open it into.
That's a worthy kind of place to drop a pin, because when you're dealing with valve float and you start to open the valves and manipulate the valves at poor timing events, you could tear some stuff up.
Yeah.
Should probably also add reversion. We should probably touch on that at some point.
I don't think there's that much reversion in these engines, you know, like not compared to like old aviation engines, like, you know, 3,000 RPM type of engines. The reversion becomes a lot critical.
In some cases, like some supercharged applications, running the bigger duration stuff with big overlap on some supercharged applications, I mean, we see it. So, I mean, we could probably have a whole session just on matching camshafts to those types of applications and some of the reasonings for it. Like, guys really don't understand the reason why they need this cam for this turbo application, or the reason why they need this cam for this NA app, or the reason why they need this cam for this supercharged application. And at some point, maybe we can start walking through some of those reasons for things like reversion.
Well, the intake port, you know, you'll see it on a carbureted dyno where you can get a fuel cloud. I probably one of the dumbest things I've done lately, but I stared down an inlet runner through like an 80 millimeter Kinsler on the dyno, and to tie the sound to the movement of the cloud in the port was really a neat exercise, you know. So you know, I guess in our mind, we think that the air is going in the cylinder, getting mixed with fuel, banging, and leaving the cylinder. Like that's the super simplified way of looking at it. But what's happening in the inlet track, you know, when you look at a high RPM engine and the fuel kind of going both ways, and there's pressure waves in the cylinder that people use to optimize cylinder filling. If you guys looked at that that Valkyrie engine where they did the firing order in the top of the plenum in a way that the pressure wave from one valve closing is kind of ram airing a sister cylinder to add engine performance. Like there's a lot going on in the inlet track that is far above my pay grade, but there's these orders of magnitude of airspeed and change that something like your car, Jamie, I'm sure the topic's been brushed on, right?
Yeah, optimizing all of the. I mean, we're chasing efficiency, right? So it's what we're doing now. It hasn't been done not in our industry, and it's been done, I think, to this magnitude in very few racing applications. Maybe Dave maybe agree or maybe not agree, but we're chasing something that's very hard to chase, and we're faced with many things that even pro stock and even some of the top racing tiers aren't facing, like piston speeds. Like our average piston speeds are greater than that of F1. Uh, I mean, almost every tier of racing I can think of, other than maybe pro stock, at over 7,000 feet per second at
We're
some.
higher than pro stock. We're way higher than pro stock. Like the only faster piston speed engines are those pro mod guys when they really spin them up. But pro stock has got a smaller stroke than we do, right? We're at let's do the math.
7,400 feet per second.
I mean, we're throwing around a 4-inch 50 stroke at 11,000 RPM.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to work, right? So it's like, I think before we can talk about reversion and all that wave tuning stuff, you still got to lock in what the camshaft is and what the engine wants, because all the reversion is based off of valve timing. You're trying to sync it up when your valves open and close.
Right.
And that's the longer discussion, and maybe we'll bring
that's
in
probably like chapter 10 of this.
Yeah, that's like we can bring in experts for that. For me, that's like the next problem set. It's not the first problem set.
Yeah, we need controlled, optimized valve motion.
Above and before the cam is what size valve, what size bore, right? And then work your way out from there. So I would start at the valve and the valve seat, and then you work to the port and the piston, and start working your way out. You got to cover a lot of things before you get to the intake track and the exhaust track.
Yeah.
It's like literally the valve is the epicenter.
Not to get too far off track, but can you remind me how much, what oversized valve you guys ended up in that K series? Is it 88 millimeter bore?
It's okay. So like I'll just say standard setups right now, or like people are running 37 millimeter K valves on 4-inch stroke engines, spinning them up to about 11,000. That's pretty standard.
Man, I'm so jealous of that.
And that's the B team stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the naturally aspirated stuff, because if you make the engine fundamentally more volumetric efficient, like it's just more efficient getting air in and getting air out, then the turbocharger is essentially just adding to the effects.
Yeah, but that's not how we do it. I mean, we just keep cramming boost, and people get impressed with boost numbers, even if the heat isn't even respected. If the engine's tough enough to live through, you just keep turning the knob. think you're doing it.
Boost is a lie too, right? I mean, you could look at boost as boost, but if it's not right, boost is restriction too, right? You might, oh, I'm running high boost. Like, no, you got this shit ton of restriction, and so it's bottling up there. You ain't running high boost.
Well, I mean, with your facility, imagine we walked through that in a real world exercise of, say you grab like a D16 with a 6466, and then we grab a K20 with a 6466, and we just look at how the manifold pressure, the pressure ratio, the volumetric efficiency, all that stuff changes as you move through different valve areas, different cylinder head flows, the whole game.
Well, I'll set up that facility in Orlando, and you East Coasters can go there and do.
Yeah. I'm just one lottery ticket away from full-time play. So,
well, aren't we all? The problem is I don't buy lottery tickets, so
I don't either. I don't either.
Yeah. So back to our little engine chart. So I guess if we were to emphasize one point on the power stroke, the exhaust opens before the piston hits the bottom.
Yes.
The exhaust opens when the piston's about halfway down, maybe a little bit more. So if people want to, help them process what events are happening, right?
Perfect. We touched on that. We touched on blowdown. We can probably go to the next stroke.
Okay, and same thing, like in the intake, we start like this one here doesn't have the overlap, but we start, like, if you start the intake cycle a little bit earlier, then you'll be at peak lift sooner, so you'll flow more air. But then when you open the intake too early, then you have these, you have overlap. You don't know if the exhaust is going to start coming back through the intake if it's too much. And then you also have piston to valve clearance problems.
These engines can get into valve to valve also, or you're far from that?
You can get into valve to valve. Yeah. And more so with the B. The B valve to valve is more critical. The K naturally had more room in it for valve to valve than the B.
Because of the 81 versus 86?
Well,
or the valve angles? What are the valve angles between the two engines?
Yeah, the included angle, I believe, is like 3 degrees more. It's going to be pointed a little bit more like this as opposed to flat. The B has a steeper valves in it, and the K has flatter valves, but not much.
So Dave, where we are here in this illustration, it reminded me of another good point that we probably bring up with cam aggressiveness. I think there's a misconception that an aggressive cam, the lift of the cam, has a correlation to the valve pocket. And maybe we can start talking about where the actual valve is the closest to the piston pocket in that rotation.
Oh, that would be great, Jamie.
Where lift has nothing to do with
intake opening. Yeah. We're chasing valves.
Should I add to this one, or should I do a different one?
Let's do a different one.
But I like it. It's my Mona Lisa.
I am Warhol. I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Walt Disney, Nike, Google.
2027 t-shirt right there.
It's my Mona Lisa or F you. I might have a F you shirt already.
Probably have one already.
Let's definitely save this for a t-shirt.
This drawing?
Yeah.
Dave's going to have this really technical drawing with all this like detail, and above is going to be this message that he wants to deliver. And you'll slow to look at the words, then you'll be like, oh man, I can't believe he did it.
Yeah, dude, like, yeah, my colorful drawing looks right at home in like a vegan salad bar, like menu. Where they write with the color pencil on the glass and shit like that. Those are my hard to see.
So 7 to 8 degrees after TDC.
So 7 to 8 degrees before TDC is where the exhaust valve will run closer to the piston. So if you look at it where it's at in the lift, so this is where the exhaust valve is in the lift. The piston's still coming. The piston is the piston is headed up to this point, and then the piston's heading down at this point. This is the closest point on the exhaust, and then this would be the closest point on the intake.
Can we grab that can we take the audio of what you just said and zoom in on that B series engine for the final cut of this? Because it's really cool to see that dance. Because I think that people think max lift is your trouble spot, like you were saying, Jamie. But it's the wins that get you.
Right, and not only that, if you look at it, if I move the center lines out this way, then I have more clearance with the piston.
I think we have to illustrate that. Use that same thing with the.
So, like, if you want to reduce the valve reliefs in your piston, you got to try to spread the centers and reduce the overlap.
And that's more for the engine guys. The average guys, I'm just thinking to try to clear up that misconception where engineers think that a big lift cam has some correlation to its proximity to the valve pocket, but when the cam is actually at max lift, the piston is the furthest away.
Okay, so let's go into when it goes into VTEC.
So basically, right there, at that particular point.
Well, it's not in VTEC yet. Okay, so we're in VTEC now, overlap.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
So see, the exhaust, it's not even at the closest point yet. It's going to be at around 7-8 degrees, right? And then,
which is just
there you go. That's the closest to the intake right now.
So it's actually good to note that the closest that the exhaust valve is to the piston pocket is actually during the closing event and nothing to do with lift. And the same to be said with the intake.
I don't know if it's so much the closing event as much as it is the closing timing, the where it closes, the center line position, or the actual where the event starts, right? So the later we start the event, the earlier we start the exhaust event, the more piston the valve clearance will get on the exhaust side, and the later we start the intake event, the more piston the valve clearance will have on the intake side.
It's really, and I'm sure Jay gets the same thing. It's really just to clear up that misconception where the guys will have, like our turbo guys, especially in the SR20, the SR world, a lot of those pistons, those dish or flat SR pistons, really didn't have any valve reliefs for the non-VVL style setups. So the average 264, 272 BC or Jim Wolf cam had significantly more lift than the factory cam, but not much more duration. And guys, I would see take their pistons and actually bring them to the machine shop to actually machine in blindly valve reliefs into these pistons because of bigger lift. And I think Jay may see that in the 2J world as well, where guys, there's a huge misconception with correlating lift to the valve relief.
Well, I think the majority of limitations in the JZ has a couple limitations. The first is the bucket diameter with a shimless bucket, because you shrink the bucket diameter down a little bit when you're using the OEM shim. And then the second would be just the installed height, the as delivered installed height restrictions. We don't get a lot of valve lift, like an 11 millimeter lift cam is like, and it just, it's not the numbers you guys were putting down the other day. I think you said almost 16 millimeters of valve lift.
Yeah, it was like 16, 6 or something like
that. I mean, it's just like awesome.
Well, like the V8 engine is like at 1 inch.
Sure. Plus. Sure. But you Honda guys are really spoiled because it's Honda, and Honda did so many things pretty fantastic that you guys have this really great base. Whereas I think the Toyota, especially like the JZ, maybe the Beams engine is a bit different, but the JZ was just like, just make it not blow up. Like, I don't think they really saw 10,000 RPM as a target. Like if you look at the VE map on a 10,000 RPM JZ compared to a 10,000 RPM K, you're just mostly going there for the numbers on the tack. There's not a lot happening up there.
But in a quarter mile, in a drag race, the high RPM with the lower torque levels and the higher horsepower is still going to make more than being at a lower RPM. So
Well, yeah,
that's why
you're just turning the crank. You want to turn the crank as many times as you can turn the crank.
probably the other. So I already said, like, okay, where does the valve open? Where does the valve close? You want a little bit of overlap just to sort of kickstart it, but I don't think you need a lot of overlap. Right? This is not like big, slow ass moving engine with, you know, inefficient valve and ports. Some overlap, don't need a ton of overlap. And then the next question is, where do you close the exhaust valve? Right? The intake stroke obviously ends at bottom dead center, but the cylinder doesn't stop filling at bottom dead center. So the piston's all the way to the bottom here. And then if I say what's a typical kind of closing point, like in a lower RPM inefficient engine, maybe it's around 50 degrees after bottom dead center. So like the higher your RPM goes or the less efficient your engine is, you might need to increase the intake time to, you know, 60 after bottom dead center, 70 after bottom dead center, 80 after bottom dead center. So like on these race engines now, they're closing at about 80 after bottom dead center. Piston's already coming up and the air is still, you know, the air is still coming in.
Why is the air still coming in?
Because it has inertia. You know the answer to that question, right?
Yeah, I know. I just want you to say it. If the air is getting pulled into the cylinder between the depression in the cylinder and the atmospheric pressure, you have this force of air, right?
Right.
And then you get things in motion. You get that air in motion, and even though the piston has changed direction and now it's headed back up, you still have this charge in motion that is going to keep going until the intake valve slams.
Right. So we have this, you know, they call this the intake column. So whatever mass of air is in there is just going to keep, you know, we got to stop looking at air as air. It's a fluid. It behaves like any other fluid. It's got mass, it's got energy, it's got inertia. Right. So we're relying on the mass and the inertia and the speed of the air to continue filling it, even though the piston's coming up. Piston's not coming up super fast. You know, I mean, we definitely get all the filling. Let's say we fill it at 80 to, like, we close it at 80 after bottom dead center. This is where the compression really starts. You know, you have 95 degrees of compression.
Right. It's cool that you put the max piston speed in there. I like that touch.
You definitely want to close stuff or open stuff before you hit that point.
Sure, but it's just a, you know, go back 10 years, this information that you're sharing right now, or 15 years or whatever, like it sure would have been cool. Like you're tying information into this visual aid and things like when the intake valve closes and the max piston speed, all that stuff, it matters, you know?
You know, the sad thing is it's all been done before. It's just that we're just doing it in a more, I don't know, friendly way with the video. Because
it's the way that people digest information nowadays, you know?
Yeah, and like 20-second TikTok clips.
You have to work so hard naturally aspirated. I'll screw up the wording, but it's been said a million times. If we all went back to naturally aspirated, you'd find out who knew what, you know?